We're going to talk to Gyles Brandreth, interestingly, in a moment. He used to be a Conservative MP. His daughter is now a Conservative MP. He's got a book all about happiness. Whether or not that his happiness skills are being tested a little in the wake of the general election, we'll find out. We're all looking for some happiness in our lives, aren't we? Our next guest thinks he could help us.
Yeah, the broadcaster Gyles Brandreth has been giving talks on the subject based on his reissued book, The 7 Secrets of Happiness. And you might think that's keeping him busy, but he's also recently recorded a podcast with the now Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Let's find out more from Gyles. Good morning to you. Always lovely to talk to you, Gyles.
Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Roger.
That podcast, now, it was recorded, I think, the end of April. It was published the end of April. But you do get to hear a side of Sir Keir that we don't really get to hear often in public. Very emotional, very revealing about his background, about his childhood, about his parents. How did it all come about?
It came about because I have a podcast called Rosebud, where I interview famous people about their first memories. We began with Dame Judi Dench, and there was Sir Keir Starmer, and I asked him, and he said yes, because he talks about being non-tribal when it comes to politics, and I think he means it. And I liked him. We got on well, and he even wished my daughter, who was then standing as a potential Conservative MP, good luck. And indeed, he said if she gets in, which she has, he said, I'll look out for her, which I think was very nice. It was an interesting interview. It was at the end of a shadow cabinet meeting. I think it was the longest personal interview he has ever given. We sat down for sort of 45 minutes or so. And because I suppose he was a bit tired, he was relaxed. And we talked about his childhood and his parents, particularly his mother, to whom he was very close, and his father, with whom he had, I think, quite a challenging relationship because of his father's devotion to his mother, who wasn't very well. And I asked him about the memory he had of the saddest moment in his life, and he already had tears in his eyes, and he actually began to cry quite naturally. Anyway, it was a very human interview, and of course it's been listened to now by tens of thousands of people. And I was pleased, that he had a chance to talk. I'm a natural optimist, and I wish the new government well, and him in particular well. I got into this whole thing of wanting to explore happiness when I lost my own seat back in 1997. They say you shouldn't take it personally when you're kicked out by the electorate, but you do. And I went to Dublin to meet an amazing man called Anthony Claridge. I don't know if you remember him, in the psychiatrist's chair.
Yeah, on Radio 4.
Wise man. Yeah, on Radio 4. And I said to him, look, I'm feeling a bit low, I'm feeling a bit unhappy, lost my seat. And also my father had died not long before, and obviously that's traumatic in anybody's life. And we began talking about my father, and this is relevant to Keir Starmer. We began talking about my father, and I said to Anthony Claridge, why do you think my father often talked about the Second World War as the happiest time of his life? Because my father was in the army for 6 years during the war, risking his life on a daily basis. The happiest time of his life? And Anthony Claridge said, oh, that's not surprising at all. He said, yes, of course, the sailors, the soldiers, the airmen during the Second World War, they were risking their lives on a daily basis. But also on a daily basis, they were being tested. And he said, all the research shows that being tested, being challenged, is a key element to finding happiness. You don't often find very happy people sitting around not doing very much. An engagement with life, being tested and being challenged, is key to finding happiness. So I think that people in the new government will be certainly tested, and they may find happiness and satisfaction that way. Another interesting thing Anthony told me about the Second World War in relation to my mother, who was living in London then. Bombs were falling, had older sisters, they were babies, and yet she often talked about it as a good time in her life. And I said, explain that, Dr. Claridge. And he said, yes, well, during the war, people were, facing bombs, facing real hardship and difficulties. But also in London at that time, there would have been a sense of community, a sense of common purpose, shared spirit. And that makes people very happy indeed. So in the Labour Party now, in the Labour government, there will be a sense of shared purpose, common values, and that makes people happy. More challenging for the Conservatives, who may not have such shared views, and that could be one of their difficulties.
Gyles, we have 2 questions we'd like to ask you if we can. We've got about 3 minutes. So could I ask you, we'd love hearing your anecdotes, please don't get me wrong. For the first question I'd like to ask, obviously your daughter's done very well, Chester South and Eddisbury, she's been elected as the new Conservative MP and you're pretty much your old stomping ground. What advice on happiness would you give to the many Conservative MPs and workers who have lost their jobs, who will take it very personally what happened?
life is tough. It used to be said, it's said in the book of Psalms, that life is a vale of tears. This idea of looking for happiness is relatively modern. It came about really with the American Declaration of Independence, having the right to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everyone wants to be happy. It's not easy to achieve, but one of the 7 secrets of happiness, and they're quite complicated, and you need to learn all 7 of them. If you do, you'll live 7 to 10 years longer than if you don't, because happy people do tend to live longer than unhappy people, all other things being equal. One of the things is not to resist change. People do resist change. Don't resist change. I don't like change. I don't like the modern world. I mean, I can't cope. I mean, I'm never going to get to heaven because I won't remember the password. I mean, it's just a nightmare when I get to the gates. But the point is, change is the salt in the soup of life. Don't resist change. It will make you unhappy. And also, have a passion beyond politics. This isn't easy. I was lucky enough to know Margaret Thatcher, and who was a remarkable person. But when she ceased to be Prime Minister, she had no other resources to fall back on. Politics was the passion of her life. And towards the end of her life, she became quite a sad person because she no longer had that driving force. Cultivate a passion, something that you love doing, possibly beyond your work. That's key to finding happiness. Think of the Queen, late Queen Elizabeth II, born the same year as Margaret Thatcher, the same age, but she lived to 96, driven by duty, sustained by faith, but kept happy by her passion for her dogs and her horses. They really were the passion of her life. As the Duke of Edinburgh, yes, sorry, I'm going to finish this and then you can get the news. As the Duke of Edinburgh once said to me, if it doesn't fart or eat hay, she isn't interested. So cultivate a passion.
OK, we've got about 30 seconds. If you can possibly do this, Gyles, I would like to ask you, because we have on the sofa, you know the King well, you've got to know Sir Keir Starmer quite well. How do you think those 2 men are going to work together? They have to build a new relationship.
I think they're going to work together very well. The King is a very open-minded person. He doesn't have political views in the sense of party political views, but he's interested in people. And I think Keir Starmer is an open-minded, interesting human being who's going to do his best. And I think they will get on famously. The King will make sure that they do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much,
They're
Gyles.
both happy people too, because they're busy and motivated.
Brilliant. We're so grateful to you. It's lovely to hear all your stories. Thank you so much indeed, Gyles Brandreth.
We need to get him on earlier next time, don't we?
I think we could do a whole 3 hours.
A whole 3 hours.